Don't need no baggage, you just get on board.
All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord.
So people get ready for the train to Jordan. It's picking up passengers from coast to coast.
Kindly allowed me to go first. I am decidedly old school. And this is the first time I have ever shared the stage with a hip-hop artist or a rapper. And before I tell you about what happened in the March on Washington, I want to say that 50 years ago, I introduced Dick Gregory when he came to Boston, Massachusetts to do a fundraising party for SNCC. And I have to say he was a little irritated with me because I went on too long. I'm sure you don't remember this. How could you? So here we are, August 28th, 1963. The SNCC people, and I can only speak about SNCC, were in really an agony of frustration because for 2 years they had tried to register people to vote, and now, 50 years later, we can think about voting like, what is it, who cares? It was then a very revolutionary act, and it could kill you. And obviously some people think the same today, otherwise they wouldn't be going to these extremes to try to deprive people of registration right now in North Carolina. We had been appealing to the federal government over and over again. In fact, that's what I did, one of the things I did with SNCC. We'd have people coming in and saying, so-and-so had been arrested, so-and-so had been beaten, so-and-so had had their house blown up, so-and-so had lost their job because they registered to vote. And I was one of the people who was writing frantic letters, help, 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 federal government. Nothing, okay, nothing. So by the time the March on Washington came and SNCC had an opportunity to speak, people really wanted to let them have it. And John Lewis, who you all know, who has been very faithful to the cause of racial equality for 50 years, he was chosen to give the SNCC speech. You also have to understand that only 3 weeks before the march, the federal government had indicted civil rights workers in in Albany, Georgia. So the question was, where was the federal government when we needed it? And that is what John was talking about in his speech. And the story is that that speech was censored. It was censored, I'm sorry to say, by people like Roy Wilkins and can't remember, Young from the Urban League, Whitney Young, and by officials in the Catholic Church. And I want to just give you an idea of what he would have said had not they told him he couldn't say it. Okay. The original speech said, in good conscience, we cannot support wholeheartedly the administration's civil rights bill, for it is too little and too late. That was changed to, we support the civil rights bill with reservations. He said, he would have said, I want to know which side is the federal government on. That was omitted. He would have said, the revolution is a serious one. Mr. Kennedy is trying to take the revolution out of the streets and put it into the courts. Listen, Mr. Kennedy, listen, Mr. Congressman, listen, fellow citizens, the black masses are on the march for jobs and freedom, and we must say to the politicians, that there won't be a cooling off period. That was omitted. We will march through the South, through the heart of Dixie, the way Sherman did. We shall pursue our own scorched earth policy and burn Jim Crow to the ground nonviolently. That was omitted.
So yeah, we definitely were not taught that in school.
Yes.
And we were talking earlier on the phone. We call each other every now and then. And no, we were talking earlier on the phone and about just how de-radicalized the history of the civil rights movement is, and I think there's an outcome that comes about because of that, because the radical nature of what was going on, or just the radical parts that were going on, are hidden.
Yes, that's true. And I have done a lot of speaking on this, and I ask high school students how many pages in their textbooks are devoted to the civil rights movement, which was the greatest mass movement in the United States in the 20th century, mind you. And it's never over 3 pages. That's what your children have learned. They have learned practically nothing about the civil rights movement. What did you learn, Boots? Well, you learned a lot because you were in a political household.
Well, yeah, and I was involved in political organizations, but they taught us what they needed us to learn for today. And what they needed us to learn for today was, 1, everything is over, no need to fight anymore. That's what they taught us. Civil rights movement came and went. They won all this justice. Everybody is free now. And they also taught us that the struggle was only about being able to vote. So now, if you want change, go vote. And what they leave out is that there are some differences. There are some changes that have developed, but they didn't come about through voting. They came about through, a lot of tactics, and some of them were the ones that were used in the civil rights movement that they don't want to teach us about, like sit-in, what is that, but occupying, right? But a group of young people does it today, and because we've all been taught that 1, there's no need to fight, and 2, the struggle is all about whether you vote or not, that we don't have any idea that of what it took to actually even be part of organizing at that time, and what it will take right now.
Well, in SNCC's short history, we help people register to vote. We actually we got rid of the terror in the South. That was the great thing that we did. We got rid of the terror. Unfortunately, we didn't stay around long enough to do the next stage, was once you have the right to vote, you have to have someone to vote for.
So I guess this begs the question and this discussion about voting for the right person, and kind of what Ms. Simmons was talking about how history is taught to us, that there were these heroes. There's a few heroes of the civil rights movement, and that and I believe that when we're looking for the right person to vote for, that's also doing the same thing. It's looking for an elected representative to change our fate, as opposed to organizing. So we can look at a history of a whole movement in which people died, in which people shut cities down, shut things down, and what we get from it is that we need to vote for the right person. I think that there's a huge distortion if that's what we're getting from it. And I think that it successfully disempowered people to have that idea that was the end of the civil rights movement. That the civil rights movement is over. We've gotten everything that we need, And now we just need to look for the right person to vote for.
And there is a reason why every January you hear Dr. King and I have a dream and I have a dream, because Dr. King has been shrunk. And you don't hear that he was fighting against the war in Vietnam. You don't hear that he was actually struggling for a distribution of wealth. He actually was on the side of the 99%. And there's a reason. We have to ask ourselves, who is teaching this history to us? The same thing. It's the same thing that we talked about on the phone. Would you talk about that very nice story you told me about how the Panthers with the uniform? I mean,
okay.
That's an interesting story about on-the-ground organizing.
Well, so along with that hero idea of how we're taught the civil rights movement, one other area that's talked about is the Black Power movement. And for a lot of us, I'm from Oakland, California, and when I discovered the Black Panther Party, which was actually pretty late, for living in Oakland, California, all we got was these superheroes in black leather jackets with berets. And sometimes you'd want to be as tough as they could be. But there's a really high bar that's set there, right? There's these strong superheroes with guns and almost military uniforms, and they were making it happen. But the truth about it is that the Black Panther Party passed a resolution in 1968 that they wouldn't wear the black leather jacket and berets anymore. And because what they were finding is that they either got derision, meaning you're not part of us, you're something different, or they got support. But it was like, y'all go do that, handle that for us. You're our superheroes. And they wanted to put forward an image that showed that they were regular people that were taking a stand, and that you too could take this stand. Those pictures that we see that keep getting put out there are the pre-1968 pictures, the ones that make organizers and make revolutionaries look different than us. And that's how we're taught about the civil rights movement as well, that through the great orators, the folks that had the time and the practice to get that together, and the few organizers whose life were extraordinary, that hopefully we could live up and change ourselves into being that person, as opposed to getting involved in a movement right now as you are and becoming the person that you need to be.
Well, this is sort of because O'Hara was talking about ordinary people. And this is what I tell people. I mean, I am more than ordinary, the garden variety coward, if you ever want to find one. And I found myself in unbelievably dangerous situations, and, was actually hit over the head once by a cop in Danville, Virginia. And so I know that every person sitting in this room can do what we did 50 years ago. Every one. You may not think you can, but I know you can, because I'm exactly like you. And Zohara has talked about that too. That was the great secret of on-the-ground organizing, was to give people the idea that they were really powerful and strong. And if you talk about what's going on now in this miserable world right now, there's only one thing that we have. Like, we don't have the guns and the drones and the helicopters and the planes. We only have one thing. We have us. And us, when us gets together, we actually can really change things.
And I think that part of that analysis comes with some of the information that's left out. That's why the civil rights movement section is so small, It's because they have to do that to leave out all the important things. You know, like if they make it bigger, then they might have too much of the truth in it. Like, it was only recently that I knew that it was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. To leave out the jobs and freedom, you know, everybody knows about the March on Washington, and everybody knows I have a dream, at least that first line. You know? But if you talk about it being for jobs, then the question is why? The question, it makes the civil rights movement be connected to a larger struggle. Mm-hmm. And if you said that it was for jobs and that people weren't getting paid enough and people couldn't survive on the wages that they get, then it looks like we didn't win. Mm-hmm. And so all the problems that are supposed to be post-civil rights movement problems, like quote unquote black on black violence, things like that, that keep getting brought up as in there's oppression now, there's exploitation now, but the reason for poverty comes from within the impoverished people. And that's what's put forward. And part of that is able to be sold to our own communities because of the distortion of how we got where we are right now. So everyone talks about stopping the violence in black communities, but nobody talks about that this violence is connected to people having to be involved in an illegal economy. Absolutely. Right? It doesn't just come from young folks have gone crazy. That's what we keep getting taught. You know, we keep getting taught young people of color are savage, lazy, and ignorant. And that's the same story that we've been told before. It just used to be that we didn't used to believe the newspapers. You know, but now we believe the newspapers because we believe that we won everything that we were supposed to win, and we believe that, and we're disconnecting our problems from an economic struggle. And if you have a class analysis onto it, as obviously if you're going to have a march on Washington for jobs and freedom, there's some class analysis being had there. If you subtract that class analysis, then you confuse everybody. So.
And also, one other thing, Boots, you all were given iPhones, iMacs, iPads, all the I's. They became more precious. That people have been bought and paid for.
I still don't have an iPhone, so I'm trying to get one. Anybody got one for me? You know, yeah. So that leads to why things. You know, we talk about the movements and the struggles that are going on right now, such as Trayvon Martin incident, and you know. People, you know, we kind of approach this from this sort of bewildered stance of like, why would they look at a young black man in that way? Why would they think that he's dangerous? And then you get the conservative black folks that go on TV and say, yeah, we act that way, and that's why they should shoot us, you know. But on the other hand, a lot of people are not even addressing the fact that there is a need for that stereotype. It serves a purpose. It's not just by accident that, you know, it's not that it just makes a good story on CSI or whatever. It's because they need to blame poverty on the impoverished. And they need to create that stereotype so that even poor white people think, oh, poverty comes because you're doing something wrong, right? And so that racist stereotype serves a very large purpose that keeps this whole system in place. And we're not going to solve it simply by putting out, I think we need to put out good ideas that are different than those stereotypes, good ideas of what black folks are. But we're not going to solve that problem of racist stereotyping until we get rid of the need for racist stereotyping. And that is only going to happen if we have a militant mass movement, a radical mass movement that is able to shut down industry when we want it to happen. If industry was shut down, you would have got rid of stop and frisk real quick if all the train drivers just stopped working one day. You wouldn't have had to go to court. But we in the left have run away from anything to do with the class analysis because we're afraid to be called communists. We're afraid to be called revolutionary. And so for the past 40, 50 years, since the March on Washington, we've been trying to figure out new ways to talk about the problem without saying that we need a whole new system. New ways to talk about it that just create even more confusion. And that's because we just have who knows why that is. Mainly it's because we haven't been doing the work. We've been talking about it. We've been talking about why we don't have a civil rights movement anymore. And we've been talking about what was good about it and what was bad about it. But we need to apply that to right now and talk about why all of us, regular, ordinary people and extraordinary people aren't in an organization and aren't in a movement that is actually demanding change. That is actually demanding change through direct action. Because that's where we need to be right now.
Perfect way to end.
All right.
What else can we say?
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Needing to clutch for power.